Hello, Culture Hash time. Gonna talk about the new album from Kodak Black, Dying to Live. For those who labelled today's movement of auto-tune singing and rapping as mumble rap, Kodak Black is one of the most well-known members of this fraternity of artists. Kodak Black broke out in 2016 when he was featured in XXL's freshman class of 2016, an annual breakdown that the magazine does of the up-and-coming rappers of the year. Kodak Black had been releasing mixtapes since 2013, but 2016 was the breakout year for him. Kodak Black followed up this new notoriety with the single Tunnel Vision, which peaked at number 6 in the US singles chart. Tunnel Vision was the lead single from Kodak's 2017 debut album Painting Pictures. Painting Pictures also performed well on the charts and peaked at number 3 in the US album charts. Kodak followed this up with the 2017 mixtape Project Baby 2. This mixtape featured 2 platinum singles, most notably Roll in Peace, which had a feature from XXXTentacion, the now deceased and controversial Florida rapper. Both Kodak Black and XXX have similar backgrounds. They're similar ages and they're both from Florida and have dealt with legal issues in their past. They've spent time in prison and have made a public attempt to try and reform their image and move away from this violent streak that they were known for previously. Dying to Live is the second studio album from Kodak Black. Earlier this year, on Valentine's Day, he dropped the mixtape Heartbreak Kodak, but Dying to Live is the first Kodak Black project we've heard since he was released from prison in late summer of this year. Kodak was imprisoned for marijuana possession, child neglect and gun theft. And while the gun theft and child neglect charges have been dropped, Kodak still faces an open sexual assault case stemming from an incident which occurred in Carolina in 2016. It's hard to believe that Kodak Black is still only 21 years old, and Dying to Live is probably his most personal and mature project to date. There's been a notable improvement on Kodak's lyricism, and he's much better at carrying an album of about 50 minutes than previously we've heard on his projects. There are only 4 featured artists on Dying to Live. Offset and Travis Scott are featured on ZZ, while Lil Pump and Juice WRLD appear on a track each. The style of this album is primarily trap. As you'd expect from a trap album, the usual big name producers are involved on Dying to Live. Southside's on here, London on the track, Ben Billions. There's a real theme of redemption here as Kodak tries to show a bit more maturity than we've heard on previous albums. Kodak still discusses a lot of criminal activities, but from a more mature, nuanced perspective than we've heard before. On earlier Kodak projects, these first-person crime narratives were a glorification of his past, whereas nowadays Kodak spent a significant amount of time in prison. He's a bit more remorseful, and it feels like he's learned from these experiences and wants to reform himself. Dying to Live opens with the track Testimony. This is introspective Kodak, and a still from the video for Testimony is used as the album cover as we see Kodak being baptized in red water. And in the video he comes up from this baptism covered in red water and he looks like he's covered in blood. But the theme is very clear that this is Kodak trying to get a second chance. Kodak talks about how he's happy but there are tinges of sadness and he's still looking to fulfill certain things in his life. Even though he's showing off on Instagram, there's still an area of sadness within Kodak, and he explores this in a really interesting way on Testimony. The most compelling tracks on Dying to Live are the personal ones, the ones where Kodak explores his life and the choices he's made to be where he is so far. There are some party songs on here, tracks like Gnarly with Lil Pump. Gnarly is pretty simple pop rap, just boasting from both the rappers. Nothing too special. Likewise with Mosh Pit, which features Juice WRLD. Juice WRLD's verse is pretty poor. He's just on here because he's a big name in rap at the moment. I thought Juice WRLD was going to be a flash in the pan, but he keeps getting featured on albums like Kodak's one here. He did that joint mixtape with Future, So I don't think Juice WRLD's going to go away. I was hoping he'd be more of a Kent Jones and just annoy everyone for a bit and then we never have to hear from him again. But it seems like Juice WRLD might be a thing that we have to talk about more in future, unfortunately so. And Kodak himself said that this is not his favourite song from the album. Kodak admits that the only reason he added Lil Pump and Juice WRLD to the features is because they're two successful artists and he wants to get some streaming money. So very little thought went into Mosh Pit or Gnarly. However, ZZ is the highlight of these party tracks that are featured on Dying to Live. This track blew up when everyone heard the beat and saw Kodak doing the little dance. This track is produced by D.A. Doman. D.A. Doman also produced Taste, which features Offset and Tyga. Both these tracks are based around a steel drum effect over some really crisp trap drums. Both these tracks are bangers, but ZZ is just fantastic. I love how Travis Scott and Offset are featured here. They all work really well with Kodak. Each guy just drops in and then just drops out, and the verses are really fluid and it just got a great energy, great feel here. ZZ's been Kodak's biggest hit so far. It peaked at #2 in America and even cracked the UK top 10, which is something that Kodak Black has yet to do. And it just shows the power of fusing trap drums and steel drums over some nice bouncy production and sticking Offset on there. I also quite like Malcolm XXX. On this track, Kodak compares XXX to Malcolm X, something that I don't necessarily agree with, but Kodak argues that both these figures are trying to outrun a violent past that has sort of stereotyped them a bit. And I can see where he's coming from. Kodak sort of warns the audience about, do what I say, don't do what I do, because you'll get in trouble like he has in the past. Kodak empathizes with XXX and talks about how he wants to outlive his violent past and get some changes in his life, but feels like people are still holding these criminal charges and his record with the law against him. Kodak's really passionate here. I really like his delivery on Malcolm XXX. Malcolm XXX leads quite nicely into Calling My Spirit. Calling My Spirit's got nice sung vocals from Kodak. He half sings, half raps his verses and continues on this theme of redemption and change. He talks about his goals, where he wants to go, and there's a tinge of sadness to Kodak here. It's a really open moment from him. I love the drums on this track. They complement Kodak's voice and his cadence perfectly here. These introspective tracks are the highlight of this album. While there are party songs, the tracks that really stand out are the ones where Kodak's getting introspective, the ones where he just talks about how he's feeling and just his past affecting his future. Transgression is another nice track. It's got a really interesting beat here. There's this wobbly sound effect that just keeps playing in the background. I can't really tell what it is, but it really sounds quite nice here. Affects the drums really nicely. Kodak just raps just the whole way through. It's about 2 minutes long. On Transgression, Kodak's just talking about his criminal past, just sort of flexing his muscles, if you will. He's really just going for it. And while Kodak Black's never going to be regarded as an extremely talented lyricist, his energy and his flow here are just perfect. And it makes Transgression a great track. One of the highlights from this album for sure. Dying to Live is Kodak Black's most personal and compelling project to date. It's obvious that his time in prison has affected him, and the music reflects this new direction that Kodak's taking. He seems more mature. He's able to carry this album almost single-handedly, and there's a lot of variety here. It doesn't just feel like Kodak's just talking about street life and what he's doing and who he's going to beat up, which affected some of his other projects negatively. Dying to Live just takes a more mature, nuanced view of these street narratives that Kodak usually tells, but he mixes them in with themes of redemption and change. What makes Dying to Live interesting is that Kodak mixes these street narratives with themes of redemption, and he asks the audience, can someone be forgiven for their violent past if they make an effort to change it in the future? You can tell he was really affected by the death of XXX and how perception of him's changed ever since his death. This is Kodak's most considered project to date. The audience learns a lot about Kodak and how his recent time in incarceration has affected him and changed his outlook on life. I think this is a very strong project. I very much enjoyed it. There's a lot of variety. This album is very strong. There are great beats here. It's got great energy. And Kodak's just got so much fire in his belly here. It's fantastic. I'm a big fan of this album. For me, Kodak Black, Dying to Live, 8 out of 10.